In defiance of an order from Musa, who was bitterly jealous of the unexpected glory which had come to his Berber lieutenant, and commanded him to advance no further, the unfortunate general pushed on without delay. Dividing his forces into 3 brigades, he spread them over the peninsula and reduced city after city with little difficulty. Mugith, one of his officers, was dispatched with 700 horse to seize Cordova. Lying hid till darkness came on, Mugith stealthily approached the city. A storm of hail, which the Muslims regarded as a special favor of Providence, muffled the clatter of their horses' hoofs. A shepherd pointed out a breach in the walls, and here the Moors determined to make the assault. One of them, more active than the rest, climbed a fig tree which grew beneath the breach, and then, springing on the wall, flung the end of a long turban to the others and pulled them up after him. They instantly surprised the god and threw open the gates to the main body of the invaders, and the town was captured with hardly a blow. The governor and garrison took refuge in a convent, where for 3 months they were closely beleaguered. When at length they surrendered, Cordova was left in the keeping of the Jews, who had proved themselves staunch allies of the Muslims in the campaign, and who ever afterwards enjoyed great consideration at the hands of the conquerors. The Moors admitted them to their intimacy, and until very late times never persecuted them as the Gothic priests had done. Wherever the arms of the Saracens penetrated, there we shall always find the Jews in close pursuit, while the Arab fought the Jew trafficked. And when the fighting was over, Jew and Moor and Persian joined in that cultivation of learning and philosophy, arts and sciences, which preeminently distinguished the rule of the Saracens in the Middle Ages. With the cooperation of the Jews and the terror of the Spaniards, Tariq's conquest proceeded apace. Archidona was occupied without a struggle. The inhabitants had all fled to the hills. Malaga surrendered, and Elvira, near where Granada now stands, was stormed. The mountain passes of Murcia were defended by Theodemir for some time with great valor and prudence, but at last, being persuaded into offering a pitched battle on the plain, the Christian army was cut to pieces, and Theodemir escaped with a single page to the city of Orihuela. There he practiced an ingenious deception upon his pursuers. Having hardly any men left in the city, for the youth of Murcia had fallen in the field, he made the women put on male attire, arm themselves with helmets and long rods like lances, and bring their hair over their chins as though they wore beards. Then he lined the ramparts with this strange garrison, and when the enemy approached in the shades of evening, they were disheartened to see the walls so well defended. Theodemir then took a flag of truce in his hand and put a herald's tabard on his page. And they too sallied forth to capitulate, and were graciously received by the Muslim general, who did not recognize the prince. "I come," said Theodemir, "on behalf of the commander of this city, to treat for terms worthy of your magnanimity and of his dignity. You perceive that the city is capable of withstanding a long siege, but he is desirous of sparing the lives of his soldiers. Promise that the inhabitants shall be at liberty to depart unmolested with their property, and the city will be delivered up to you tomorrow morning without a blow. Otherwise we are prepared to fight until not a man be left." The articles of capitulation were then drawn out, And when the Moor had affixed his seal, Theodemir took his pen and wrote his signature. "Behold in me," said he, "the governor of the city." At the dawn of day the gates were thrown open, and the Muslims looked to see a great force issuing forth, but beheld merely Theodemir and his page in battered armor, followed by a multitude of old men, women, and children. "Where are the soldiers?" asked the Moor, "that I saw lighting the walls last evening?" "Soldiers I have none," answered Theodemir. "As to my garrison, behold it before you. With these women did I man my walls, and this page is my herald, guard, and retinue." So struck was the Moorish general with the boldness and ingenuity of the trick which had been played upon him that he made Theodemir governor of the province of Murcia, which was ever afterwards known in Arabic as Theodemir's land. Even in these early days, the Moors knew and practiced the principles of true chivalry. They had already won that title to knightliness, which many centuries later compelled the victorious Spaniards to address them as Knights of Granada, gentlemen albeit Moors. "Caballeros granadinos, aunque moros hijos d'algo." Meanwhile, Tariq had pressed on to Toledo, the capital of the Goths. He was seeking for the Gothic nobles. At Córdoba he had looked to meet them, but they had fled. At Toledo, with the Jews delivered into his hands, the nobles were not to be found. They had fled further, and taken refuge in the mountains of the Asturias. Traitors, like the family of Witissa and Count Julian, alone remained, and these were rewarded with posts of government. The rest of the nobility had disappeared. The country was abandoned to the Moors. Spain had become, in fact, a province of the vast empire of the Arab caliphs, who held their court at Damascus and swayed an empire that stretched from the mountains of India to the pillars of Hercules. What remained to be done towards the pacification of Spain was effected by Musa, who, when he heard of Tariq's continued career of success, sailed in all haste across the straits, followed by his Arabs, to take his full share of the glory. He crossed in the summer of 712 with 18,000 men, and after reducing Carmona, Seville, and Merida, joined Tariq at Toledo. The meeting between the conqueror and his superior officer was not friendly. Tariq went forth to receive the governor of the West with all honor, but Musa struck him with a whip, overwhelmed him with reprimands for exceeding his instructions, and declaring that it was impossible to entrust the safety of the Muslims to such rash and impetuous leading, threw him into prison. When this act of jealous tyranny came to the ears of the Caliph Walid, he summoned Musa to Damascus and restored Tariq to his command in Spain. Before returning to Syria, Musa had stood upon the Pyrenees and seen a vision of European conquest. His recall interrupted his further advance, but others soon pushed forward. An Arab governor, as early as 719, occupied the southern part of Gaul, called Septimania, with the cities of Carcassonne and Narbonne, and from these centers he began to make raids upon Burgundy and Aquitania. Eudes, Duke of Aquitania, administered a total defeat to the Saracens under the walls of Toulouse in 721, but this only diverted their course more to the west. They sacked Bonn, exacted tribute from Sens, seized Avignon in 1730, and made numerous raids upon the neighboring districts. The new governor of Narbonne, Abderrahman, resolved upon the conquest of all Gaul. He had already checked the operations of Eudes, who presumed after his victory at Toulouse to carry the war into the Saracens' country, and now he attacked the Tarraconese and boldly invaded Aquitaine. defeated youths on the banks of the Garonne, captured Bordeaux by assault, and in 1732 marched on in triumph towards Tours, where he had heard of the treasures of the Abbey of Saint Martin. Between Poitiers and Tours he was met by Charles, the son of Pepin the Heristal, then virtual king of France, for the feeble Merovingian sovereign Lothair had no voice to oppose the will of his powerful mayor of the palace. The Saracens went joyfully to the fight. They expected a second field of the Guadalete and looked to see fair France, their prey, from Calais to Marseille. An issue momentous for Europe was to be decided. And the conflict that ensued has rightly been numbered among the 15 decisive battles of the world. The question to be judged by force of arms whether Europe was to be Christian or Mohammedan, whether the future Notre Dame was to be a church or a mosque, perhaps even whether St. Paul's, when it came to be built, should echo the chant of the Agnus Dei or the muttered prayers of Islam. Had not the Saracens been checked at Tours, there is no reason to suppose. Had not the Saracens been checked at Tours, there is no reason to suppose that they would have stopped at the English Channel. But as fate decreed, the tide of Mohammedan invasion had reached its limit, and the ebb was about to set in. Charles and his Franks were no emasculate race like the Romanized Spaniards and Goths. They were at least as haughty and valorous as the Moors themselves, and their magnificent stature gave them an advantage which could not fail to tell. 6 days were spent in Pasha engagements, and then on the 7th came a general melee. Charles cut through the ranks of the Muslims with irresistible might, dealing right and left such ponderous blows that from that day he was called Charles Martel, Karl of the Hammer. His Frankish followers, inspired by their leader's prowess, bore down upon the Saracens with crushing force, and the whole array of the Muslims broke and fled in utter rout. The spot was long and shudderingly known in Andalusia by the name of Pavement of Martyrs. The danger to Western Europe was averted. So crushing was the disaster that the Moors of Spain never again, during all the centuries that they ruled in the south, attempted to invade France. They retained indeed their hold of Narbonne and the districts bordering the northern slopes of the Pyrenees for some time longer, until 797, and even ventured upon foreign raids in Provence. But here their ambition ceased. The Battle of Tours had once for all vindicated the independence of France and set a bound to the Muslim conquest. Like the swelling tide of the sea, the Saracen hordes had poured over the land, and now through the hammerer of the Franks a voice had spoken. Hitherto shalt thou come and no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed. On the other hand, the kings of France were so deeply impressed with the courage of their Muslim neighbors that though they too delighted in occasional forays, or once only did they attempt the subjugation of Spain, Charlemagne, the second Alexander, could not contemplate with composure the immunity of the Muslim power. On the other side of the Pyrenees, as a good Christian, he was pledged to extirpate the infidel. And as an imperial conqueror, the existence of the independent kingdom of Andalusia was hateful to his pride. His opportunity came at last when the accession of the first Spanish prince of Omeyyad stock roused the hostility of some of the factions which were always prone to revolt in Spain. Charlemagne was invited to interfere and drive out the usurper. The Spanish chroniclers make Alfonso, king of the Asturias, and heir of Pelagius, summon the Frankish emperor to his aid, but there is more reason to believe that the invitation came from certain disappointed Muslim chiefs who could not brook the authority of Abderrahman, the Umayyad, and who were ready to submit even to the sworn enemy of Islam rather than recognize the new ruler. The moment of their appeal was propitious. Charlemagne had just completed, as he thought, the subjugation of the Saxons. Their chief, Wittekind, had been banished, and thousands of his followers were coming to Paderborn to be baptized. The conqueror's hands were thus free to turn to other schemes of victory. It was arranged that he should invade Spain while the factious Muslim chiefs should make diversions in his favor at 3 different points. Fortunately for the newly founded dynasty of Córdoba, this formidable coalition came to naught. The allies in Spain miscalculated their time and fell to blows with one another, and when Charlemagne crossed the Pyrenees in 777, he found himself unsupported. He began the siege of Saragossa when news was brought him that Wittekind had returned and raised the Saxons, who were again in arms and had advanced as far as Cologne. There was nothing for it but to hurry back and defend his dominions. He rapidly retraced his steps, and the main part of his army had already crossed the mountains when disaster overtook the rear in the pass of Roncesvalles. The Basques, who nourished an eternal hatred against the Franks, had laid a skillful ambuscade among the rocky defiles of the Pyrenees, and allowing the advanced part of the army to march through, waited till the rear guard, encumbered with baggage, began slowly to thread its way through the pass. Then they fell upon it hip and thigh, so that scarcely a Frank escaped. The Christian chroniclers tell terrible tales of the slaughter done that day. According to them, it was the Saracens side by side with the Knights of Leon who wrought this havoc upon King Charles. We read in the old Spanish ballad how the legendary hero Bernardo del Carpio led the chivalry of Leon to the massacre of the Frankish host. With 3,000 men of Leon from the city, Bernard goes to protect the soil Hispanian from the spear of Frankish foes, from the city which is planted in the midst between the seas, to preserve the name and glory of old Pelayo's victories. Free were we born, 'tis thus they cry, though to our king we owe the homage and the fealty behind the crest to go. By God's behest our aid he shares, but God did ne'er command that we should leave our children heirs of an enslaved land. Our breasts are not so timorous. Our breasts are not so timorous, nor are our arms so weak, nor are our veins so bloodless that our vow should break. To sell our freedom for the fear of prince or paladin, at least we'll sell our birthright dear. No bloodless price they'll win. At least King Charles, if God decrees he must be Lord of Spain, shall witness that the Leonese were not aroused in vain. He shall bear witness that we died as lived our sires of old, nor only of Numantium's pride shall minstrel's tale be told. The lion that has bathed his paws in seas of Libyan gore shall heed not battle for the laws and liberties of yore. Anointed cravens may give gold to whom it likes them well, but steadfast heart and spirit Alfonso ne'er shall quell. Side by side with the doughty warriors of Leon, who thus refused to join the Prince of the Asturias in his homage to Charlemagne, were, according to the romances, a host of valiant Saracens who joined in the onset upon the retiring Franks. Pseudo-Turpin's legendary history of Charles and Orlando tells of a fresh body of 30,000 Saracens who now poured furiously down upon the Christians, already faint and exhausted with fighting so long. And smote them from high to low, so that scarcely one escaped. Some were transpierced with lances, some killed with clubs, other beheaded, burnt, flayed alive, or suspended on trees. The massacre was horrible, and the memory of that day has never faded from the imagination of the peasantry of the district. When the English army pursued Napoleon's marshals to the pass of Roncesvalles, the soldiers heard the people singing the old ballad of the fatal field, and Spanish minstrels have recorded many incidents, true or false, of the fight. One of them One of the most famous is the ballad of Admiral Guarinos, which Don Quixote and Sancho Panza heard sung at Toboso, according to the veracious history of Cervantes. The day of Roncesvalles was a dismal day for you, ye men of France, for there the lance of King Charles was broken too. Ye well may curse that rueful field for many a nobler peer. In fray or fight the dust did bite beneath Bernardo's spear. There captured was Guarinos, King Charles's admiral. 7 Moorish kings surrounded him and seized him for their thrall. Thrall. And the ballad goes on to tell the tale of Guarinos' captivity and of his revenge at the tourney when he slew his captor and rode free for France. Yay! Yay! Yay!